Today's show is brought to you by BarkBox.com. Get one free extra month of BarkBox at getbarkbox.com/amps.
Neck-throughs, guitars, they're like a guy that won't have a beer with you.
I want to hear what's pushing the notes.
Freddie King and B.B. King, Albert King, and let's not forget Burger King.
I don't want to blow my knuckle out.
Stainless steel is the work of the devil.
These go to 11.
From the East Amplification Tone Labs in Baltimore, Maryland, it's the Amps and Axes Show. With your hosts, Jeff the Godfather of Low Wattage Amps Bober and Mick Marcelino.
Well, good day to you, Mr. Bober.
Good day to you, Mr. Marcelino. And it's, I think pretty soon it's going to be
110.
It's going to be, well, it's spring-like first for a day or so.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And then we move on to full-blown summer.
Yeah.
But then possibly fall again after that. So, you know.
It's 6 inches of snow. I love it. And we just keep hammering that check. There's no global warming going on. No, the Earth's just vomiting all over the place. Anyway, I want to just let everybody know that the old ampsandaxes.com is working well. You can go ampsandaxescast.com, ampsandaxes.com. You're going to end up in the same place, kids.
That's right.
And when you do, there's some manufacturers on the right-hand side. If you pay a visit to those guys, especially our Amazon, they kick a little bit back to us, and it keeps everything moving. And we really do appreciate you guys doing that because, yes, it's not free. It does cost a couple dollars for us to put this thing out.
It's free to you, but it's not free here.
Exactly. So. And you know, look, you need stuff. And everybody wants a drone showing up at their house, dropping a package off. I know I do. So
I just want the drone.
If you shoot it down, it's even funnier, right?
But then it won't work again, and I'll be all sad.
Yeah, but a box of pencils would hit the ground like it would just, I'm just thinking. You know what I mean? Like a shotgun. I just can't wait.
Stop thinking. Just stop thinking.
You're going to hear shots fired, and then it's going to be, no, I'm just shooting this thing out of the sky.
Right. Buzzing around my house.
But anyway, if you guys go there, definitely just bookmark the thing. That's all you got to do. Visit our page one time, bookmark that ad. Next time you want to go buy something from wherever, it doesn't matter.
Just hit your link.
Just hit the link, man. Boom. Done. Hey?
Done.
And then they kick back. They're paying more than what you are. That's even cooler. Think about that, right? I mean, how the hell do you not get away with that? And look, we cannot, and I can't stress this enough. We cannot do this without you guys.
Spread the word. Spread the word.
Yes.
You know, make us like peanut butter. Spread us all around, man. Friends, relatives, wives, friends, friends of wives, friends. Anybody you can think of. And anybody that I'm missing.
I want to tell you.
Tell them all. Tell them all.
Exactly. And I just spent like 45 minutes talking to this guy who bought an exercise bike from me. His name was Larry. I don't know his last name. Very nice gentleman. And I said to him, no, it's Axes, like A-X-E-S. And he went, oh, well, I'm a keyboard player, so I knew exactly what you were saying. I said, yeah, guess who doesn't? So when you do tell your friends, make sure you tell them that it was A-X-E-S. And then, of course, let them know that you heard it here first.
Yes, because we try to bring you a first as many ways and times as we can. So hopefully this will be another one for you. We got a very cool guest today, and the president and we're owner of a very cool company too.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna take a pause for the cause and come back with the president and owner of Reverend Guitars, Mr. Ken Haas.
What's up? This is Keith Sticks from Tsunami Cables, and you are listening to Amps and Axes.
For our listeners only, BarkBox is offering an opportunity to receive one free extra month. What is BarkBox? BarkBox delivers 4 to 6 natural treats and toys curated around a surprise theme each month for your dog. All edibles are made in the USA or Canada, and 100% of the products are tested on their own animals. When you go to order, tell them how big your dog is. Then choose a plan. 1, 6, or 12 months plans are available, and you can cancel at any time. Bark boxes are shipped free on the 15th of each month. And if your dog does not like something in the box, we'll send you something they'll love for free, because they're all about dog happiness. So to receive 1 month free, go to getbarkbox.com/amps. Again, that's getbarkbox.com/amps to receive an extra month of BarkBox for free.
All right, and we are back as promised with our guest of the week of Reverend Guitars, Mr. Ken Haas. Ken, how are you?
I am terrific. How you guys doing?
I'm good, but you sound more terrific than I.
Where do you guys host this show from? What city are you all in?
Out of Baltimore.
Baltimore, Maryland. I'm in sunny, beautiful Toledo, Ohio, and
oh, look at that!
On this day, this is one of the 2 days of spring that we're going to be getting. We're all very excited about it. It's supposed to be. I woke up yesterday. There was snow on the ground, and then on Friday, it's supposed to be 80 degrees. So
well, there you go.
That's how we do it here in the Midwest. I love Baltimore. I used to live in Frederick, Maryland when I was a kid.
Look at that.
And I went to grade school at East Frederick Elementary. And I have had a lot of family in the area. And my father went through the Naval Academy, and my mom went to Johns Hopkins University.
Look at that, man.
And and then, of course, I can't understate it enough. Of course, Baltimore is the home of the lovely and talented Miss Jen Wasner of Wyoke, Reverend signature artist.
Oh.
And she is just an absolutely fantastic player. And
who was just on CBS Saturday morning this past Saturday.
Yeah, I saw a clip, and she had on her beautiful Reverend signature model.
Look at that, man.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, I got a story. I got a little bit of a story.
Fire away.
I heard about the guitar company back when this unknown guy named Kid Rock started doing his thing, and I was like, I'd never seen these guitars before, and there's Kid Rock, and I'm like, who is this slack-jawed guy? Because his song. That song was Ball to the Wall or whatever.
Ball to the Ball, bang to bang.
Yeah,
yep.
That had not really hit yet, and he was still kind of like the Detroit guy. He was still in the Midwest, and I'm like, wow, this guy's like brand new, and there's this new guitar and everything, and then that song broke, and I'm going, oh well, they sound really good, and then I started reading about them, and I was like, kind of blown away about how your building techniques are, and I know we're going to get into that, but of course I'm going to turn it over to Jeff so he can get all the other stuff, and then we'll get back into the crazy guitar world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back in that day, that was Joe Naylor, I would assume. Yeah. So.
Yeah, of course.
But Ken, let's get a little history on you. I always like to jump in the Wayback Machine with our guest and get a little history. You already told us where you were born and raised, but let's figure out how you got into this world of music. Okay.
I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and my dad worked for General Motors, and GM. He was a district service manager, and GM took him to Maryland for a while and to Florida for a while, and then by the time I was in high school, we were back in Detroit. So I'm a Detroit boy as well, and basically, the timelines, it's fun that you mentioned Kid Rock, because he's a lot of the reason that I'm here. He's a lot of the reason that we're all still here. Joe Naylor started Reverend in the 90s. In the late 80s, he went to Roberto Venn Lutheran School, and he has an engineering degree from Western Michigan University. And he really just liked tinkering around with guitars, and this got him into having his own buy-sell trade sort of repair shop, where a lot of vintage guitars went through his hands right before the vintage explosion. So he got to he was buying and selling Jaguars and Jazzmasters at $300-400 still. Before that, I mean, obviously the custom color Strats and the Les Pauls and all that stuff were worth big bucks even through the 80s. But he really found himself gravitating towards the offset waist models of the whole 60s era. And not just from the major manufacturers, but, he made a lot of, Echo guitars and Vox guitars and off-brand stuff and Danos. He made a lot of those guitars playable for players in the Detroit area as they brought those things in. And so Joe kind of picked and chose what he liked out of working on all of those instruments to design the original Reverend guitar when he had that small shop. And then he did Naylor amplification for a little while too, and those amps are still being made in Texas, and they still bear his name. And then when he decided to get out of the amp business and really concentrate on the guitar, because that's where his passion was. So all that being said, and I don't want to talk, listen, you guys can put me on and I'll go for an hour. So interrupt me with questions. But I mean, basically, Bob, Kid Rock hung around Joe's store quite a bit in the 90s. And that's part of the reason why that guitar is on the cover of that record. When the band started doing really well, and when they signed their deal and were getting ready to go on tour and stuff, Joe was hanging around with those guys quite a bit and helped them put together gear to get the first tour off the ground. And so Kid Rock was just really, really cool with Naylor for a lot of years because of that. And hence he played the guitars exclusively for quite a while, which was very, very cool. Yeah. And he was a real, loyal Detroit guy for a really long time. So we really appreciate him helping us get that jump start and putting us in the national spotlight early. Excuse me. Now I played in a band from Toledo, Ohio back then that used to do shows with him occasionally. And so when I saw my first Reverend in a music store in Detroit, I was like, oh, isn't that what Kid Rock has? This was in 99, and the company was about 2 years old. And so in early 99, I bought one, and then I looked Joe up and basically stalked my way into the business. I at the time I was playing in bands, and I had a day job selling automotive sandpaper. And when I realized that the bodies of the guitars were being made in Detroit, I figured he had to be using abrasives on something. And so I went and figured it out and started selling him all of his sandpaper. And then he and I got to be really good friends, and he took me to a NAMM show, which was probably in the summer of 99. And he just took me as a guest. And while we were there, I sold a guitar to Will Ray of the Helicasters.
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of on accident. I was in somebody else's booth, and I was talking to Will Ray, and I was thinking to myself, like, it was my first NAMM show. So I'm like talking to Will Ray, and I'm thinking to myself, shit, I'm talking to Will Ray. Like, wow, well, this is rad. And then he looked at my badge and was like, Ken, tell me about Reverend Guitars. Now, what are those? And I just I told him about the guitar and the construction of the guitar, and he got real interested. And he went down and saw Joe and bought a couple, and I walked by when he and Joe were putting a deal together, and he said to Joe, well, that's Ken. That's the guy I talked to. He's a real nice guy. And after Will left, Joe was like, dude, I'm going to bring you to every single one of these. If you keep bringing guys like that into our booth, and I was like, yes. And that turned into me going to NAMM shows and guitar shows for 5 to 6 years. And then when Joe... So there's sort of like a turning point in the story, because as you alluded to, the original guitars were of a very non-traditional body construction. So the bodies we were making in Detroit, and the outside of the body was a one-piece mold-injected plastic rim, and the tops and the backs were like a phenolic material, like a countertop material, and there was a 6-inch wide center block of Carina in those guitars.
Wow.
And then we were having the necks and the pickups made for us by Mir Music in South Korea. and then we would assemble the bodies and slap the necks on and put our pickups in. And so the pickups and the necks were made to our specs, and we were building the bodies. And there was no paint in the construction of those original bodies because they were just assembled out of plastic and wood. So it was kind of cool. We could offer like this really high-end guitar for under $1,000 because we didn't have all the EPA hassles and all the painting stuff that goes into them.
Sure.
And they were really cool guitars. I mean, it was like you crossed a offset waist sort of bolt-on Fender style guitar with a Dano semi-hollow thing, but had the really good playability of the bolt-on 25.5-inch scale neck, and we still use that neck shape now because Mir still makes the necks now. And they were popular, but they never really broke mainstream. You know, one of the things that I'm still talking. I warned you guys.
No, it's fine.
I really like what I do. So,
I love the story.
Yeah, the story is awesome, man.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I did for Joe was I tried to take guitars out to bands, and and I did a lot of, I did the whole it wasn't 30 years ago. You stood around outside the stage door or on the fence, and you like hollered, "Hey, you guys want to look at guitars?" You know, even in the early 2000s, I just emailed bands management and tried to get appointments with them at sound checks when they would come through the Detroit area. And I was
if you were lucky, you had ins at certain clubs.
Sure.
Because you were there so often. You know, I did the same thing myself, you know.
I still do this, and I do this so often that there's a good-sized room in Detroit, like about a 3,500 seater, where the security guys know me so well that when I pull onto the side street, they move the cones, and they just assume I have an appointment with people. And so sometimes I just park and walk in, you know. But,
exactly.
But I used to take these old guitars around to guys, and they would, I mean, every once in a while I had people. One of my favorite examples of this is Rob Baker of the band The Tragically Hip. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. And I had those guitars sitting on the stage at a huge outdoor venue in the Detroit area called Pine Knob at the time. I think it's DTE Energy Theater now or whatever. But he didn't even pick it up. He looked at it and he goes, "Oh, I'm not really into the Dano thing." And it was sort of at that moment where I thought, yeah, people aren't getting this. And Joe knew people weren't getting it. You know, I mean, as cool as the guitars were, they weren't really aggressive enough for rock, I don't think, and they weren't bright enough for country. And so we had this sort of blues guy vibe, but in our market with the blues guy vibe are all these real expensive guitars and PRSs and things of that nature. And so it was just kind of muddled. And around 2004, 2005, Joe had the idea to have Mir in Korea, the company that was doing the necks and the pickups for us, make us some prototype solid body guitars. And one of the things that happened with that original design was we were sort of limited to body style. I mean, that we had a mold to make the ring for the body. And so while the pickup variations changed, the body never did. Okay. And Joe had some other stuff that he wanted to try. And so he had Mir make us some prototype guitars. And when they came in, he sent one to me. I'm looking at it now. I've got one of the first two sitting here. And I took the guitar out on a gig. And of course, being a guitar player, I was resistant to change. And I didn't like the idea of Joe not, because I just thought his thing was so unique, you know. And I took this guitar out, and just right out of the gate, it just sounded better. You know, like having that solid body in your hands with those pickups and the neck shape, it was just awesome. And I was like, oh, you know. And
now what? Let me ask you, what kind of stuff were you playing? Because you got attracted to the earlier guitars. What kind of stuff were you playing with them? Obviously, it wasn't heavy and it wasn't country, because you said
no. When it was when I first met Joe. I was in a rap metal band called the Kids from Krypton. And that is
nice.
Yeah, well, I'm not making. Look it up. It's brilliant. You'll be so glad you did. And we had a blast. I mean, we did a bunch of classics. Bring on the Horrors, Pimp. It was good stuff. And hence running in the same circle as Kid Rock when he was a local guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
It was a similar kind of stuff. And I took the cover off my humbucker and did, I did stuff to make the guitar work. And I used big enough amps that it didn't matter. And so, yeah, that's how that started. And then, of course, my band's morphed over the years. That was over. When that was over, we stopped doing it too. And so that's been done for 15 years, but it was some of the most fun I ever had for sure.
That's very cool. The kids from Krypton, huh?
Yeah. So what happened around 2005 was then we started having Mir build some guitars for us in Korea. And Joe did all the design work, and he still does. He hand draws these things on paper. And the drawings themselves are just these beautiful works of art. Nice. And then we have prototypes made at Mir, and we bring them in and we screw around with them. And if everything goes well, we go into production and we start offering them. And so about late 2004, 2005, we started bringing in our Charger models and our Jetstream models and a couple other things from them, Warhawks, and Club Kings, and started marketing those. And very quickly, the sales of those eclipsed those original models, to the point where there was a point in 2006 where we went 90 days without taking an order for the original style Reverend. So the writing was on the wall. So then we started concentrating all of our efforts into the Korean build, and it turned out to be the best move we ever made. And of course, we have fans of those original models, and I love them. I held on to all of mine. I think they're fantastic guitars, and they definitely serve a place, and they serve to put us on the map to get us to where we are. But we don't have any plans on revisiting that stuff because we're really happy with the way things are going. And so, in a nutshell, to get you to where we are now, when we launched this new model, I went to a NAMM show with Joe, just doing my usual. I work for him part-time, maybe 4 times a year, going to guitar shows in Philly and Dallas and going to NAMM in Anaheim and Nashville. Mm-hmm. And at the NAMM show in January of 2007, he really had the line dialed in. And we went to that show and I sold, I think, 450 or 470 guitars or something. And Joe was like, dude, I have to hire you. You know, and I'm like, yeah, I know. And it only took me like 10 years, to convince him, right? And but we opened up a lot of dealers, and all those dealers were expecting a relationship with this guy here. So it was cool. I was thrilled. And we grew the business really, really well in 2007, 2008. And then at the end of 2008, we had a hard reset, just like everybody else did in MI, and it was tough. And we literally lost a third of our dealers. I don't know if people look back on that and remember how bad it got for a little bit, and a lot of smaller stores weren't ready for it, and a lot of bigger stores weren't ready for it.
No, it did get really bad because the MI industry, I mean, if you look at all industries, it's I don't care how big you are, it's a relatively small industry. And it's basically fed by disposable income.
Absolutely.
Unless you're a professional musician, it's fed by disposable income. Yeah. That's the first thing that went in 2008.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that hurt everybody.
It did. And we were in a good position to ride it out. I mean, basically everything we were doing at the time was still under $1,000. Everything was between $600 and $800 or between $599 and $899, somewhere in there. And so people who were no longer buying guitars that cost over $1,000 were maybe stepping down into our price range a little bit, and so we had a good enough thing to sort of ride it out, which is great. But the end result of that was then in 2010, my wife Penny and I ended up buying the company from Joe, and Joe is very, very much a creative person, and Joe spends all of his time thinking about guitar designs. And I know that sounds sort of like a cliche or whatever, but I got an email. I got an email with a whole new bass line just yesterday that I didn't expect at all. with literally with 2 new basses that I was like, oh wow, rad, you know. But he's always working on something, and I think the day-to-day of running a business was not what he signed on for, you know.
Yeah,
it's not, and I can tell you, it is not for the creative of the business. It is just that. It's one of those things that right. It's the biggest necessary evil that gets the most in the way with moving the product forward. I can tell you that 100%.
I agree. And the thing is, Joe and I have done something that I can't understate, that I think is really unique, in not just in business, but just in life in general, where Joe and I started out as really good friends, and then I went to work for him, and that didn't ruin the relationship. And then we completely switched that role, and that didn't it didn't ruin the relationship. And Joe and I are still really good friends. And Joe is awesome. He's hilarious. And when people, you know, a lot of times, because I have become so much like the face of this on the videos and doing all the, you know, because I'm that guy. You heard me do the intro for you guys. I'm that guy. You want to talk about reverends? Hell yeah, you know. That people think that Joe's not involved anymore. That is not the case. Naylor, I don't design guitars. I don't pretend to design guitars. One of the things that kills me about this business, and I'm not gonna name any names because there's no point in it. But I mean, I see people all the time that say they design guitars, and they haven't designed anything, you know. And I just it's weird to me. I don't understand it. And I'm not talking about even any of the big names or the big controversy, if you even want to call it that, that's going on out there right now. I think the PRS John Mayer guitar is cool. There, I said it. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
But because I don't care. Good for them. Good for them. I'm glad they found something that made it work. That's great. You know.
Yeah.
I was at a guitar show. This side story. I was at a guitar show last year, and I was looking at relict Strats with humbuckers in them, and they were kind of cool. They had these really cool like roasted necks, and that's why I was looking at them, because Reverend is incorporating roasted necks on all of our bolt-ons now, and so I've struck an interest in them. So I was looking at this company's guitars. I don't remember what the company was, and the sales guy, the guy who was there, kept telling me, well, you know, the guy who designed this wanted to do this, and the guy who designed this wanted to do that. Well, you know, the designer said blah 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 blah. And after he said it like a third or fourth time, I looked at him and I said, Leo Fender said all that? And the guy looked at me like, what? And I'm like, it's a Strat. You can't, you know, like, dude. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you sound weird saying that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. And you could even go one step further and say George Fullerton, because he was the one that really, you know.
Right, yeah, sure. So that's all a side note. You know, I think what Naylor's got this uncanny ability not only to take like our guitars look like something that you've seen before, yet they look original and they're tasteful, and it's hard to click on all three things. And I think Joe,
absolutely.
I think Joe is very, very rare in his ability to do that. And then the other thing that Joe does that I can't, or Penny can't bring to the table is Joe will talk to an artist, and like you guys want to hear Billy Corgan's story, because I think this is hilarious.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
We do a Billy Corgan signature model, and we do a signature guitar, and we do signature pickups. And Joe built him, in the old models, Joe built him a guitar around 2000, a couple of them, and a couple of detuned guitars that are tuned to D standard that were 26 1/4 scale, so just slightly longer. Custom builds for him on stuff that he did in his, I think it was Oceana era. I'm not, somewhere in there.
Well, Billy's a big guy, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so Billy really liked the sound of P90s, but he really hates the noise because he plays with so much gain. But he loves the mid-range, and this is a long-running thing, right? And so Joe made him a guitar, and he ended up with somebody else's P90s in it, and he loved the guitar. And then he went on and did a deal with somebody else eventually, and we kind of lost touch with him when we started doing our new stuff. And a lot of years went by, and then a girl named Nicole was playing bass for the Smashing Pumpkins, and she buddied up with us. And that's my phone ringing at the office. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to get it. And so we ended up with Nicole playing our new basses. And then we go to a sound check, and Jeff Schroeder, the lead guitar player, got a couple of guitars from us. And all of a sudden, Billy's got Reverends on both sides of him on the stage. And when he had the opportunity, when I guess his deal was up with the company that made his model before, he asked us if we were interested in putting together a model for him. And so we talked about it, and Joe had some ideas on what he wanted to do. And we put together a prototype real quick, and Billy was like, yeah, you guys can style it a little bit more. And so one thing led to another, and we had the look of the guitar done in just a couple of months. But then it was time to try to really get this pickup thing done. And Naylor is listening to Billy talk, and I remember going to a sound check with him and showing him this guitar, and it was done except for the pickups. And Joe had just wound some pickups, and we're at a sound check, and we're listening to the guitar through his live rig. And Corrigan says to Naylor, I love the string-to-string clarity of these pickups. I love the fact that even with all this gain, I can hit a chord, and I can hear all 6 notes in the chord. The clarity is amazing. But what it's missing is just a little bit of that Sabbath thud, that like dirt, that sort of Sabbathy grind. You know what I mean? And so what I heard was, I really like the clarity of the pickups, but I want him to not have so much clarity. That's what, or something.
Right.
And I was like,
it's almost a contradiction.
Right. And Naylor goes, no, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. I got it. And I looked at Joe. I'm like, okay. And we're driving home after the show, and I'm like, you know what he's talking about? And Joe's like, yeah, I got it. And 2 days later, Joe calls me, and he says, I got it. I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, I'm going to send him the pickups, blah, blah, blah. We send him the pickups. 3 days later, Corrigan reaches out to us and says, yep, that's it. It's done. Let's go into production. And I just couldn't believe it. And I've seen
Joe actually winds his own prototype pickups?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, without question. Yep.
Wow.
And I've seen him do that so many times. I mean, with the Pete Anderson hollow body, it was a process. We worked for months on that guitar because Pete wanted a hollow body that would react like a solid body in so many ways, but still sound like a hollow body. So the design of that guitar is very unique in order to pull that off. And when it came to doing the Pete Anderson Eastsider guitars too, we didn't want to just do a copy of a Telly style guitar. I mean, even though Pete wanted that body shape, there was an originality thing, a sound thing that Pete wanted out of it that he wasn't getting in his previous instruments. And Joe came up with a really cool way to chamber it around the neck joint to get it to work right and sound like he wanted it to do. And wow. Joe he's so comfortable with the physics of the instrument that he's able to be very, very creative with it. So that is why I think we have a really unique team and a really unique structure here. Penny is really strong in marketing, and she really watches trends as far as colors are concerned.
She's like the COO, right?
Yes, she is. And yep. And she also, when I met Penny, she was playing guitar in a band and crushing it. And so she's familiar with the instrument, even though her main instrument is piano. And then, so she handles marketing and helps with business things, back end stuff, ordering things of that nature. And then she's sort of the go-between between us and the ad agency that does all the ads that you see in the magazines, and getting the photographers together and getting the NAMM show organized and getting the artists organized for guitar shows and stuff. And Penny's really good at all of that sort of logistical thing. And then, and Joe is very creative, obviously, when it comes to the guitars. And then I just try to be the face of this thing and not be too much of an ass.
Well, no, I mean, you have a lot to do with why the company eventually wound up where it was. It really does sound like, whether you want to say that or admit that or not, or whether Joe would, but it's your personality helped to bring the guitar to people's attention.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing. So, you can't be too much of an ass because you're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
You know?
Honestly, I think if you really, there's so many bad cliches too that can be said here, but I mean, I love this. This is where I always wanted to be and what I always wanted to do. And these instruments are just, they're an extension of all of us that work in this building. And so, you should see us. A guitar comes back that got broken in shipping and we all stand around and go, oh man, it's ridiculous.
You broke my child.
Well, I think it's refreshing because every, and I'm just saying this, but a lot of companies have pretty much fucked out the Strat to no end. And it's not that for the lack of trying, it's just that, they take that familiar shape, and of course everybody goes, well, it's the most successful shape. And it's like, yeah, but, the originality, it's almost like music, right? We're finding more and more music is losing its originality. And, you can go see the Super Strat 500 different times. And now they're actually dipping their toe into the Les Paul realm of things. And it's like, yeah, they're iconic guitars and they have their own shape and they've done their own thing. But it's also very refreshing to see some of these cool shapes. And the thing is it's with the radius that you guys offer, which is like, and some of your models are 10 to 14, you can rip on those things like you could on a Jackson, or you can make it as bluesy as you want. And because if your strings are, look, for all the shredder guys out there, we know that if your strings aren't laying on the neck, you're not going to be able to have the speed that, that some of the other guitar manufacturers give you that opportunity because they're using real flat radiuses.
Right.
But, when you have that comfortable radius, the 10 to 14, that's like a heaven because you can do all the blues stuff. Your hand doesn't fatigue, but then you can just, if you want to rip, you can just go. So, and you get this cool shape. I mean, it's nothing like seeing the kid that you think isn't going to be able to lift 500 pounds and then he deadlifts 500 pounds. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like you see the Reverend and you kind of go, oh, well, that's just that guitar. And then some dude starts, doing Yngwie riffs on it. It's going to wake you up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and like Ken alluded to before, it's like, their own unique shape.
Yeah.
To a degree, for the most part, but there's still just enough familiarity about the shape because that's if it's not just familiar enough, it takes a lot more for people to pick it up.
And
it has to have just enough. It has to have just enough to go, well, that's not really a Strat or a Tele, but that's really cool. Let me see that one.
Yeah.
Well, and then they pick it up.
We've seen all the German manufacturers that make the new age guitars where we go, I'm scared to play it because I may end up bleeding, because there's so many things coming off of it. But no, they've taken that familiar thing kind of almost like it's its own new style of retro, but it's still, it's still
in the
rock
middle
and
somewhere.
roll.
It's in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we try to mix in a fair amount of innovation too. One of the things, and not just. I mean, we touched on the signature model thing a little bit, but when we do a guitar for an artist, it's not necessarily about us slapping the artist's name on something that we already make. It's more about making the guitar that the artist really wants to play, and then marketing that guitar to their fans. And so, and people have come to me in the strangest of ways, just recommendations from other people, or people just call me up out of the blue. We do this really cool signature model for a kid named Matt West, and I call him a kid. He's like 25, 26, which to me is a kid. But he's from the UK, and he plays in a band called Neck Deep, and they're part of this new generation of pop punk that's going around, and they're rad, man. They're such a killer band. They were one of the main acts on Warped Tour last year, and they just wrapped up a tour of the States here a few weeks ago. And they'll probably be back in the fall. And he just, they were on tour coming through here 2 summers ago. And maybe not even that long. Maybe just last spring. No, it must have been 2 summers ago. And they reached out to me and just said, hey, or his management reached out to me and said, hey, this band is coming through on tour, and they're going from Cleveland to Grand Rapids, so they'll be coming through Toledo early in the morning. The guitar player is wondering if he can come by and meet you and check out some guitars. And of course, absolutely, right? So I just say, oh, yeah, sure. And then I'm about 8:30 in the morning, I hear rumble, 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 and I look outside, and a tour bus full of trailers pulling in. And I'm like, wait, who is this dude? You know what I mean? A lot of dudes stop buying vans, which is kick-ass, because that's where it's at as far as I'm concerned. But I was surprised. I'm like, holy shit. So I'm looking him up, right? Like, whoa, man, these guys have a big following. And he rolls his Kemper rig in here and starts trying a bunch of guitars. And he bought a Jetstream and a Double Agent from us and took them out on the road. And he called me 3 days later and said, hey, I can't put this Jetstream down. It is the best guitar I have ever played. It is the only guitar I am ever going to use from now on. Wow. Is there? And then he goes, do you guys do any custom work? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You just said it was the best damn guitar you ever played. And I'm like, I mean, not really, dude, because, it's kind of a production-based thing, And I said, well, I mean, it depends. I always ask, why? What are you looking for? And he said, well, if this thing just had a bridge pickup and a reverse headstock, it would be my dream guitar. And I said, I know I've only known you for a week, but why don't we just do that as your signature model? Because it would be rad. I could see it in my head. Like, yeah, a Jetstream with one P90 and a reverse headstock would be awesome, And so we do this guitar with this kid, and it sells really good. It's really cool, and I just love him. And his enthusiasm is like mine, and I keep collecting these people that are super into it. Kyle Shutt from The Sword is like Reverend Guy. You know what I mean? He's super into it. He loves his guitar, and we hang out and shit, and it's great, And Bob from Fu Manchu, they played the Orion Festival in Detroit, and Bob had been playing our guitars for like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years at that point, and we partied with Fu Manchu, and about 3/4 of the way into that party, Naylor and I were like, dude, we should do a SIG model. And we're doing one. Nice. And people dig it. So it's really cool, and the Corgan thing's really cool. We do a baritone and a 12-string, and they're consistently in our top 5 best-selling guitars, and I think it's really cool because I think even a lot of people out there who have their 6-string that they love, that they're not going to part with, a guy who's been playing this, but has the use for a 12-string here and there, has use for a Descent here and there. Nice. We have an amazing pro-level product in both of those guitars that when Joe sets out to do that, kind of like the signature models, when Joe set out to do the baritone, it wasn't, well, we're just going to slap a longer neck on the Jetstream and call it a day. And when he set out to do the 12-string, it wasn't, well, we're just going to slap a 12-string neck on the Club King. It was like he plays a bunch of 12 strings, comes up with what he likes and dislikes about all of them, and then goes about correcting all the stuff he doesn't like. Sweet. And so, like, our 12-string is a 24 3/4 scale, but it's 1 3/4 inches wide at the nut, like a classical guitar. Oh. So even guys with big old yam hands like me can make C chords on it, right?
Yeah.
And this isn't hard to figure out. It's just that very few people really do it. And then,
I can tell you that's what he didn't like about the Rickenbacker that he played for sure.
Of course. And then,
like, I can wrap my head around this twice.
We put 12 locking tuners on it. We found this amazing Goto bridge that is 6-string through the body, 6-string top load. Nice. You can intonate all 12 strings, and so and then it's P90 loaded, and it's got a solid spruce top on a chambered carina body with a F-hole, a semi-hollow carina body that's CNC chambered from the top, and then the spruce top is put on it. So it has this sort of acoustic zing, which makes the 12-string very, very chimey. And so it's a real 12-string for, I don't know, $11.99 they street for.
Well, there you go.
And the baritone is instead of going all the way to 28 inches, it's a 26 3/4 scale, and we have a custom set of strings that's made by our friends at SIT that has a plain third. And the idea of the guitar is that you sit down and play it, and it feels like you're playing a standard guitar, only it's tuned to B.
Sweet.
But you don't feel like you're reaching way out for it. And so the bridges move back into the body a little bit. The pickup placement is a little bit different.
Like a bass. Yeah.
It's really kind of cool. It really truly is a sort of a hybrid. And we do a lot of them. And so Joe's, not having, one of the things that I'm very fond of saying is, by Joe not having to worry about the day-to-day of what goes on here, he's coming up with all of this crazy stuff.
And I'm going to have to check out that Barry, because that's the one thing I don't have in my arsenal is a baritone.
Well, there you go.
There you go. And then the Railhammer pickups too.
I was just going to ask you about the Railhammers.
Yeah. After the Reverend thing, after we took over the business end of the Reverend thing, Joe plays in a band and he plays tune to C, and he wanted something that would tighten up the bottom end of his guitar, because he likes to play with a lot of gain too. And he's a high gain solid state amp guy, just so you know.
Oh, wow.
Actually, that changes weekly, so who knows what he's playing now. But he had this idea that, okay, so if you imagine like your blade style pickups that have been around for a long time, the ones that are completely encased in epoxy, or even the ones that aren't, like Armstrongs and things. When you're riffing in high gain and you're doing a lot of palm muting, the blade pickups sound awesome, because they take a very small sliver of the magnetic field that's being created by the string, and so they naturally keep your bottom end very tight and compressed. The flip side of that, however, is that the high end tends to be really, really shrill, because it's doing the same thing to the plain strings. So Joe just had this idea that if the blades were only under the wound strings, and then you put these oversized slugs under the plain strings to balance them off, that you could have a guitar that had a sweet, I like to say like a sweet slashy type high end, even with high gain, but have a sort of a dime bag sort of crushing bottom end, all in the same pickup. And so he experimented with it and started putting out a few different versions of it. And what we ended up doing with the Corgan is taking that humbucker with 2 blades and 6 poles, and just removing one of the blades and 3 of the pole pieces, sort of like an old, what did they call those? The Fender pickups from the early 70s. I should quit shitting out other brand names while I'm doing this, but I can't help it. I should probably not say things like shit either. What were the magnetic field design? What did they call those?
Lace?
Lace. No. In the early 70s, in the thin lines.
Thin lines. What were they?
Where you have like the offset.
They had like the 3 and 3 pole pieces.
Yeah.
Staggered.
So we've got a blade in one coil. We've got a blade just under the low strings in one coil, and the 3 pole pieces under the high strings in the other coil.
Right.
And by playing around with windings, Joe has got those to sound just like P90s.
Sweet.
Yeah, by using like a heavy gauge wire and some sort of magic and whatever else, blah blah blah. But that's what Corgan, that's what we hit on with Billy, and then we've offered a few other lower output versions of that. We call them hum cutters. That we do in the Railhammer line too. So the pickup thing is really starting to turn into a thing. So at first, Joe got the patent all lined up and started marketing the pickups himself. And he was having the pickups manufactured right where we're having our guitars manufactured. And he was handling it all. And then it got to the point where he was sick of putting pickups in boxes. And so Penny and I bought that business from him as well.
Damn.
Oh, wow.
And we run that out of the Reverend building, and it's really worked out really, really well. And we're growing. We've been growing an average of about 20% a year for the last 8 or 9 years.
That's
great.
And so our stuff is clicking with people, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, I know I talked to Joe a couple times back in the day, like actually back probably around the amplifier era days, because there was a point there where he was offering chassis, whether they were like a standard offering or whether they were a custom thing, and I think he was probably having his chassis made probably overseas, the same place where you're having a lot of work done now, I would assume. And I was talking to him.
Are you talking about the Reverend amplifiers?
The Nailers.
Oh, the nailers were all done here. The nailer amp officially was around between 94 and 96 in its first incarnation.
Right.
And they hand built everything in Detroit.
At some point after that, he started offering like metal work, I believe,
maybe for a little bit
to the industry, because I was talking to him about, maybe we have him build chassis for our amps,
Right.
So,
that's interesting.
Yeah. It was definitely, it wasn't the early Nailer amp days, but it was probably later into the Nailer amps. You mentioned Reverend amps.
Yeah. So Joe did amps under the Reverend brand between 99 and 2002, 2003.
Okay.
And they were pretty cool designs. Joe put them together with Dennis Kager of Ampeg.
Sure.
And Joe and Dennis did the designs, the circuits together. And the original one was the Hellhound, and then that was followed by the King Snake, and then a low wattage version called the Goblin. And Joe did Reverend Alltone speakers, which are now just Alltone speakers, and you can get those here. A buddy of mine here in Ohio sells the speakers. And Joe's really good at starting businesses.
It's funny you mention Dennis Kager, because I had just done a column, my column in PG about the Sundown amps.
Oh wow!
And
cool.
he had gotten back to me like right after it came out, in Premier Guitar, and he's like, "Wow, that was a great column," and I had to think back that it was so good. I had to think back if this guy ever worked for me or not.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, Dennis is cool.
Oh no, he's a great guy.
He really is. So with the Reverend amps, Joe really wanted and really still wants, the idea behind everything we do is that a working guy should be able to afford good gear. And again, I know this sounds like a bad cliche, right? But I mean that's always been sort of the goal, is to keep everything in the mid price range, but have everything be of a higher quality.
Mm-hmm.
So like we're making $1,000 guitars now, and I like to say that we're competing with guitars in the $2,500 range. That's my goal. And
nice.
And there's a lot of different ways that we do that, but we're pretty tight on QC around here. So the guitars are manufactured at Mir Music in South Korea, and like I said, everything is made to our specs. And then they ship to our shop here in Toledo, which this is Reverend's 1, 2, 3. This is Reverend's 4th location. So Joe started Reverend in East Point, Michigan, and it was in basically a single car garage behind a bike shop. And
sure.
And it was back there for 2 years, and there were a good 600-700 guitars built in that garage. And then he moved to a bigger shop in Warren, and then that's when I started working for him full time. I was commuting up to Warren for a while, and then when I took over the business end in 2010, we moved the business to a small place in Livonia, Michigan, which was about halfway between me and Joe and our setup tech, Zach Green, who has been with the company for 20 years. If you look on the back of all of our headstocks, you see the initial ZSG, and that stands for Zach Green, and he is the last person that the guitars go through before they go out the door. And he's been with us the whole time. And then we outgrew the shop in Livonia, and I found a place here in Toledo that was only a few miles away from our house. And when I looked at the building, I could just see that it was set up perfectly for us. So we moved here in January of 2016, and then Zach moved down here from the Detroit area. And Joe comes down here about once a month and hangs out in the shop and does stuff, and then we go up to Detroit and meet with him about once a month too. And so he's not interested in talking on the phone or being involved in the daily. His design shop and his crafting table and his workshop are all at his home, and it works out that good for all of us. So I have no idea where I was going with all of this. You asked me a question that started me down this path. Okay, so what
we were on amps for a minute.
Yeah, and I'm circling back. So the guitars come to our shop here, and right. I've got 4 techs and a shipping guy, and all of the guitars go through the guys here. And when we do setups, the idea is that the guitars are 100% ready to play out of the box.
Nice.
And so I don't treat a guitar that is going to, if it's leaving here and going to Chris Funk from the Decemberists, or if it's leaving here and going to Rudy's in New York City, or going to a Sam Ash store or whatever, all the guitars get exactly the same treatment. And we set them up, we intonate them, we have very specific pickup heights that we use for all the different models to make sure all the pickups balance well. We do nut slots, we put locking tuners on everything, so we dial all of that stuff in, and we make sure that everything, that the guitar is ready to gig basically when it leaves here. So the concept is not unlike the concept of what Ibanez was doing in the 70s. Like, I'm not going to leave it up to the dealers to set up these guitars. The dealers have enough stuff to do, and they don't always do it.
They don't always have a guy. They don't have a guy that can do it.
Right.
And less and less nowadays too.
Yeah.
Right. And I want somebody to go into a guitar store and pull 4 or 5 guitars off the wall and have mine be the best playing one, and it might not be the most expensive one, but it is going to be the best playing one. And so, and then also we catch any QC issues that go on that, you know, because a lot of guys, a lot of bigger dealers, you know, buy guitars and warehouse them and ship them direct to the customers, and don't even look at them, you know. And so we know when we do all of this work here that when the customer opens the box, if the last person to touch that guitar was my setup guy, Zach Green, that dude's good to go.
Yeah.
So the amps were a similar thing. So so that's been the philosophy all along, even from when we switched from building the bodies here to having the work done at Mir in South Korea. Now the amp thing was slightly different in that the Reverend amps, the chassis were made in China, and then the cabinets were made in Indiana, and then we married the two at our shop up in Warren. And did all the QC on them and made sure everything was ready to go. So we were offering these really cool original single channel tube amps for $699, you know, $749, and the low wattage one even at $499. And they were cool, but manufacturing in China in 2002 is not what it's become now. And now I don't do any business with China now, and I'm not gonna disparage people who do. I mean, it's a global economy. That's life. That's where we are. This is what we do, you know. And we have the U.S. has such a close relationship with South Korea that us doing business with South Korea is really kind of pleasant, you know. We meet with our factory guys. I've never been there. I'd love to go someday. We meet with them at the NAMM show every year. They have their own brand at the NAMM show, and they're really, really cool dudes. But we were having, with the amps, we were putting a lot more labor hours into them here to make sure that they were perfect than we could afford to do at the price point we were at. And so it just became something that Joe didn't want to mess with anymore.
Well, you were making the cabinets here. A lot of people don't realize how expensive manufacturing a cabinet here is on its own without the electric.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's totally true.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, and also at the time we were doing that, we were doing some pedals along with Visual Sound. Bob Wheel from Visual Sound and Naylor designed a overdrive pedal together called the Drive Train. So there was the Drive Train and the Drive Train 2, and we were selling a lot of pedals. But one of the things that was happening was the focus was sort of moving away from the guitars. And Joe is in this for the guitars.
It really sounds like where he's the most comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's what he really enjoys the most. And so, and dude, there are so many people doing amps. That's another thing. People ask me if I have any intention of getting back into that. And it's like, we're making our mark in the guitar world. There are so many people that are making their mark in the amp world, in the pedal world. I don't even feel the need to mess with it, you know? I would love to co-op some pedals with somebody, so that would be cool. Jamie Stillman from Earthquaker, if you're listening, you know, I've got some ideas and some friends out there that make some just awesome pedals. So that it's not a business that I want to be in. We have a really cool relationship with Earthquaker. They're only about an hour and a half down the road in Akron, and we do clinics together in music stores and stuff every once in a while. We've been friends with those guys for a long time. Dan Auerbach from Black Keys has some Reverends, and that's how I met Jamie, because the founder of Earthquaker used to be their tour manager. And so we go back we go back a long way with those guys, and they make some killer stuff, and everybody makes killer stuff. There's so many good products out there right now. We're in a really cool sort of heyday of guitar building, I think.
Yeah.
And all gear. There's so many cool things out there. It amazes me that I still see stuff and be like, shit, I got to get one of those. You know, if you go and see the Pumpkins on this tour, not to bring up Corgan again, but they're touring, so we're doing a lot of stuff around them at the moment. Or Reeves Gabrel's in The Cure. Reeves is going to be here next week, and he's coming into Reverend to do some photos and some demo videos, and then we're going to go over to Reverb and do some stuff. Sweet. And like Gabrel's tours with The Cure, with the guitars, his Space Hawk model that he uses in The Cure is the exact guitar that we sell to his fans. There's absolutely no difference. Reeves could come in here, grab one off the shelf, and take it on the road. He has. They had some guitars get damaged by Canadian Customs years ago before they were playing at the Riot Fest in Chicago. And Reeves grabbed a couple of Jetstreams off the wall at Chicago Music Exchange and played a Cure show with them. And these guitars are no different. We don't do something magical for the big giant rock stars. This is what we do. They're ready to go.
I like that.
Unlike some companies we know that what you see like in the back line is nothing like what you can walk into the store and purchase. And I am so against that. I am just
I think people know. I mean, I think people get it, you know?
Yeah.
And that I don't know.
You would hope, but I know sometimes they don't. I know they don't. You know, you would hope they did.
Oh, look at I'll drop a name, Steve Vai. Steve Vai does not play an Ibanez that's built anywhere near Japan. It is.
Don't break my heart. Listen, don't tell me that, dude. I have 7 gems.
Man.
Dude, he
I love gems.
He takes
Ask anybody.
He takes, and he has said it in interviews, but not blatantly come out and say this is exactly what I do, but he says I tap the body, that's a C, I tap the neck, that's an F sharp, I put the two together, now and he goes through that thing, and they sell him tempered necks, they sell him all kinds of crazy shit, and to have him test out. Now it's Steve Vai, so look, I've played Gems, and they're awesome guitars. I mean, they're not crap built. They're built by the Japanese high-end guys.
Yeah, Fuji Gen, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure that look, we all know it's Steve Vai. It's like Eddie Van Halen. It's there's a guy that touches it and works it to no end for 6 months, and then he gets it. But I just like the fact that it's still surviving. And Jeff, we had this conversation at NAMM where we were like seeing that the manufacturers, the big ones, are the Koreans. They are making the high quality guitars that you can afford, and you can take them out and rip the shit out of them, and they're gonna perform. They're not going to be something that
they're
you got in two halves.
Have a whole lot of weak links and that aren't going to hold up to the road.
And what's amazing to me, and we've talked to a couple of our builder friends. And just like you guys at Reverend, I mean, it's like these aren't crap parts that you're putting on there. You're putting locking tuners and the nuts and the string trees and all that. I mean, that's all high end stuff. And it's like, well,
And I love the Wilkinson Trends too. And I played Floyd's in the '80s, and I used to be in this punk band in the '80s called Big Drill Car, and the guy played RG 550s.
Oh,
and I had to have one, RG 550s and RG 570s, because he used to do all that trem flutter shit all the time, and I tried to be just like him, like you do when you're a kid. That was my hero, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Red Beach, man.
So that's what got me into that stuff, and I love the Wilkinson trem. We have models that we route out the body underneath the Wilkinson on, so that you can do all that Floyd stuff on it. And with the locking tuners and the synthetic bone nuts, and the little triple tree thing that we do, and the fact that the Wilkinson trem is so stable, you can beat the crap out of those trems, and they stay in tune every bit as good as any of those old Ibanez's I still have, by the way.
Wow.
Nice. And
I'm super down, and I like them as a manufacturer. I mean, I think those guys do a lot of things right, and they make a lot of really cool products. I've got a couple of J Custom guitars too, man, and I'll put them up against any guitar made anywhere in the world. I think that in the plant over there, I think if you do something wrong, they take off a finger or something.
Oh yeah, it's Harry Carey. There's no doubt.
Have you ever seen their booth at the NAMM show? There's all these dudes standing around in suits, and you're like, and they don't talk.
No.
You know what I mean? You're like, I was going to ask a question, but I think I'm just going to go away.
Right. Might cut my tongue out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, their stuff's cool. And like I was saying before, I think a lot of people have a lot of cool stuff right now. We're in a really fun little heyday, you know, even the big manufacturers. And then we'll see what happens with them. Obviously, everybody's in having their own little fit of turmoil right now. And but then, you know, I don't know. We're riding the wave. Good. I think the door was opened for a lot of interesting manufacturers to come in during the 70s, which is why we had a rise of brands other than the big two through the 70s and the 80s. And then the big two came back really strong in the 90s, building some really quality products. And it's not like they're not building quality products now. It's just that the door's been sort of opened again. Yeah. And a lot of guys like us are coming through and making really cool, unique stuff. And so there's a lot of options when you're out there looking at guitars. Yeah. And
well,
so,
it seems like you're making a lot of cool and good decisions, you know, product-wise and business-wise, and some of the big guys, not so much. So we'll see what happens.
Have you guys seen the Air Sonic? Have you seen the Air Sonic? Have you seen this guitar that we build?
Let's see. I've been on your page 1,000 times.
Talk, just to I'm trying not to overwhelm your listeners with tech stuff, but check this out. This is Joe's idea. We do a bolt-on guitar now called the Air Sonic. Oh yeah. And the idea behind this guitar is that there's it's a bolt-on maple neck, of course, and it's a solid Carina body, and the center of the body is thick, like our Warhawk and like you know, older like Firebird guitars. Like it's got a raised center ridge, so that there's a lot of mass and sustain underneath of the bridge, right, for that initial punch and sustain. But the wings of the guitar are really thin. No, they're solid.
Oh, they're solid.
They're really thin. They're like 22 millimeters thick, and those F holes that you see are punched straight through the wood. They go all the way through the body.
That's badass, man.
So the wings resonate freely when you play the guitar, and the guitar is a solid body. And it sounds like a Samahala. It's
wow,
that is a cool looking. That is badass, man.
And so this is the kind of thing that like Naylor comes to me and I'm like, what? You know, like dude, he's like, I got this idea, it's gonna work. And
it's the new Steve Vai monkey grip.
it is super bizarre, and it works. It sounds great, and we've been doing really, really well with it. We launched it at the NAMM show this year. So okay. So
that's really cool.
That is cool, man.
Now my daughter's in a play tonight, so I got to go. But I want to leave you guys with a story, and I got to be honest with you. I'm working on it. I've told this story before. I do a lot of dealer clinics and stuff, and like this is sort of my big closer. Okay, but it sums up sort of the what I do to me. So if you guys, do you have any more questions for me, or can I?
No, I think you can totally wrap with the story. Absolutely.
Yes, all right. Yeah. Kick ass. So I am old school suburban punk rock guy from the 80s, and I grew up with I when I was 13 in 1983, and my little 13-year-old girlfriend's older brother came in with the Liberty Spike Mohawk and the Doc Martin boots, and I went, whoa, what the hell is that? And went and looked through his record collection, and I saw all the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and Minor Threat, and I was like, what is this stuff? And I got really into that stuff when I was, all through high school. And I was fortunate enough to get into it early enough that I saw Black Flag on their last tour, and I saw the Minutemen on their last tour, and I saw Husker Du, and I got to see all these great bands, And I became a huge fan of Mike Watt from the Minutemen. And he went on from the Minutemen and started a band called Firehose, which was like my number one favorite band of all time. And it was this trio with a really, really prominent bass, and just an amazing band. And after Firehose, Mike did a really popular solo record with Dave Grohl on drums and singing, and pursued that. And then he started a really weird sort of Stooges tribute band with Jay Mascis, and he did a record with Dinosaur Jr. And so he and Jay Mascis got Scott and Ron Ashton of the Stooges to do a couple shows with them. And Iggy heard about it, and that collaboration got the Stooges reformed.
Wow.
And, of course, the original Stooges bass player was gone, so Mike Watt retained that sort of Stooges thing. Now, Ron had Naylor amps and loved Joe. Ron thought Joe was an evil genius. Mm-hmm. And every time Joe made something, Ron bought a bunch of them. And so Ron had very early Reverends right out of the gate. And even with 3 single coils, those early Reverends were a little heavy for Ron in his Stooges gig. And so Joe came up with a circuit for Ron's guitar that actually cut bass. It's sort of like a reverse tone control. Instead of bleeding treble, it bled bass signal. Mm-hmm. And we call it our bass contour, and we still use it on all the models. But this was developed for Ron to use live so that he could make his guitar sound even thinner to do that Ice Pick Stooges thing that Ronnie did, right? Yeah. And so all these years after me, seeing Firehose between 86 and 94, I probably saw that band 30, 40 times. Years later in 2006, we're at a Stooges show, and Mike Watt comes over and looks at me and says, "It's the Detroit San Pedro connection. How are you?" Like, it was just so overwhelming to me. I'm like, wow, man, I can't believe, you remember, dude, fucking rad. And so, and he loved Ronnie, and he thought Ronnie's guitars were cool. And so years ago, when we were still doing the original models, Joe and I had approached Mike and asked him if he wanted to do a bass with us. And he was like, "Oh, I love you guys, but I kind of do my thing." And we kind of let it go, but it always stuck in the back of my mind. And so about 5 years ago, he came through town, and I met with him again, and we talked about Ron, and we talked about stuff. And I said to him, "Hey, let's really get together and do this bass thing." And he said, "Ken, you know how much I love you and Joe, but I kind of do my thing." And I said to him, "Well, Mike, I want to do your thing. I don't want to, like I said to you guys earlier, the goal here isn't for me to put your name on the back of something I make. The goal for me is to make the bass that you've always wanted that you've never had. I want you and Naylor to sit down and come up with this thing," because he was playing some short scale, like EVO basses towards the end because of his hands, because he played so hard for all those years, and and he needed something that was a little bit easier on him, but he still wanted that big tone. And so Joe set out to make this Watt bass, and we worked on it literally for 5 years. I took the prototype of that bass to a Firehose reunion show in Portland, Oregon in 2012 and gave him the prototype. And it took him a few months to get back to me, and he got back. And he's like, "I kind of like it. It's okay, but I wish it did a little more of this and more of that." And then I give that information to Joe, and we have another round of prototypes made up. And then Mike is so busy that we literally can't get a hold of him. So the following year, when he comes through on tour, we take the basses and go. And he plays them. He takes one with him. He gets back to us. "Well, I kind of like this. I kind of like blah, 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 blah." We go. Joe sits on it for a little while. The next time he comes through on tour, a year and a half later, right? So this is how this project is going. And I'm like, I'm itching. Dude's my hero, right? You know who your hero is. Imagine working with your hero.
Yeah.
And so, and I get to work with my heroes, I like Reeves. Reeves is my hero, and I get to work with Reeves. him. I pinch myself. It's ridiculous. So one time Mike comes through, and we have this bass for him, and he picks it up and plays it, and without even plugging it in, he looks at it and he goes, "I wasn't really sure you guys were ever going to get there with this." But this is it. This is if we could have the back edge be a little bit more like this, so it would sit, evenly when I set it down. It like silly stuff, you know what I mean? Sure. But stuff that was very important to him. But this is the tone. I mean, this is the thing. And we're like, I'm thinking, oh my God, we got it, right? And so we then we're going, we're sending a prototype back and forth every 3 months, and boom, boom, things are clicking. And we finally get to the point after 5 years of work where we're launching this bass. And I bring my hero, Mike Watt, to the NAMM show in January of 2017. And I have a party in Fullerton, and Watt and his band are playing at my party. And they're playing with Gabrels, too. And he and Gabrels sort of, because they have a weird history together, because Watt played with Iggy, and Gebels played with Bowie, and Bowie and Iggy were buddies. And so these guys have been in each other's circles for years, and then
couple degrees of separation.
Right, yeah, right. It's the coolest thing to even be around. It's amazing.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And this is all my hero shit. So I'm just freaking. and Watt comes pulling into the NAMM show in the van, in the Econoline van, and I come into the back door. He comes to the booth, and just like Ashton, when we launched the Ron Ashton model 10 years before, in January of 2007, we launched the Ashton V, and we brought Ashton in the NAMM show. And Ronnie, riding to the airport, was like, I don't know who's going to want to come see me. Like, he was nervous about it. Like, so understated guy, no idea the impact that he had on rock and roll. And when Ron showed up, there's 100 people lined up to get his autograph, you know? And Watt was the same way. Like, people were just coming out of the woodwork, and it was like we did it, right? And so we're like, we're excited about it. We're taking orders for it. Everything's going really good. We go to the party that night, and Mike gets up on stage and he plays Joe McCarthy's Ghost, which is this old Minutemen song, and then he follows that up with this song called Forever One Reporter's Opinion, which is like my favorite song of all time. And wow. I'm sitting at my NAMM party. I own this company, and I make these guitars, and I made this bass. And my hero, like my lifetime hero from when I was a kid, is playing this bass that we made for him. And he is playing my favorite song. And I stood there 10 feet away from him, and I just burst into tears like a big giant girl. And my wife comes running, Penny comes running, she's like, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, I'm better than okay.
And that feeling is why I do this. And I get to have that feeling. And it's the best.
That is,
you know, and so I love what I do, and I'm happy to talk to you guys about it anytime. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. I really do I have to go see a high school play that I hear is going to be awesome.
Well, there you go. Of course it's going to be awesome. Of course it is.
Yeah, man.
But
wow.
Like I said, that's where it's at. And thanks for having me, and I'll catch up with you guys whenever you like. All righty?
Oh, Ken, awesome. That sounds great, man. And thank you so much for taking the time and enjoy your play. Tell Joe we said hi. Or he probably doesn't remember me from back in the Amplifier days, but tell him Jeff Bober said hi.
Okay, I can do that.
Awesome, man.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Cool, man.
Talk to you.
Well, and there you have the enthusiastic story.
Whoa.
You know.
Holy hell, I'm tired. I'm like, oh my God.
That
guy's fired up.
It's enthusiasm like that
that
puts product in front of people. And, you know, if it's a really good product, a well-made product, something that people can appreciate, it's like, yeah, man, this is great.
Hey, I went through the specs. I know we didn't really cover it, but, you know, the bolt-on models have 6 bolts. You talk about stable, you're not going to move that neck around.
6?
Yeah, roasted necks. And then, of course, you know, all the, you know, some of them have 10 to 14-inch radius, which is a compound radius. Some of them have a straight 12 radius. And let me tell you, man, it's really, it's a refreshing instrument, because I like to see companies do that kind of crazy thing and, you know, it work, you know, because we have been looking at the same instruments for many, many years. And they're, you know, sort of like how your music needs to kind of be original. It's those things, you know, they give you that originality, I think. And like I said, it's almost like that kid that you see that you go, that kid can't lift 500 pounds, and he deadlifts 500 pounds. Those are not, they're not junk guitars. And they're going to do what you want it to do, regardless of what style of music you want to play. And that's
right. I mean, when you
key.
find one that fits well, you know, fits you well, plays well, and sounds the way you need it to sound for your particular genre of music, it's going to turn out to be a good instrument, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you know, look, I mean, we can talk pro-American as much as we want because that's where we're from. But the Koreans they're definitely allies of ours, and the South Koreans, I should say.
Yeah, of course.
North Koreans want to lob nukes at us, but yeah, anyway, the the South Koreans have a very good reputation with most of these American manufacturers or American-owned companies. They're not doing what the Chinese did in the early 2000s, as Ken alluded to. You know, you were wondering if you were going to see your guitar with a different name come out, you know, when the Chinese started
absolutely.
Making your product. And, you know, they deserve a fair shake because we need more, you know, we've said this 1,000 times. We need more people playing.
Right.
We need a lot more people playing instruments. And
you have to be able to afford an instrument
exactly
to continue playing it. You know, you can only, you know, get it from school or rent it for so long before it doesn't make sense anymore. And if you want to continue, you have to have a instrument that's of good enough quality to continue playing, you know, with comfortably, you know, so that you can progress, you know. And like we said a million times, there's so many of them out there now, you know.
Yeah.
At all different price points.
And here's the thing. If anybody goes, well, you know, my favorite artist doesn't. It's like, okay, we met Andy James at NAMM in Winter NAMM. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to get Andy on the show. He wants to come on the show. Andy is like, you know, the king of metal. He has more riffs than anybody I've ever seen. And this guy plays LTDs. I mean, he obviously could play ESPs, but he chooses to play the Korean-made model. And I go, well, there you go. There's the kind of answer that, you know, it's not crap because this guy who is, you know, in the metal world, this guy is held up very high. You know, he's like a Guthrie Govan. But his guitars only cost about $900 as opposed to Guthrie's, which cost $4,000. But I guess what it does is it kind of wakes people up and make them understand it's not the guitar all the time. You know, it's not, you know, Andy James is playing an LTD, which is, you know, the Korean made version of the more expensive ESP. And that guy kicks the living shit out of it. So it's like, you know, don't complain about your guitar because the Koreans are obviously making very high quality guitars, or artists like Andy James would not be using them.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. So I mean, you know, if you want a real Les Paul, I don't see any problem with
going with Heritage. I mean, whoa. I mean,
that was that Heritage was beautiful too when I picked that up at NAMM. It was like one of the best Les Pauls I've played.
And they're more in the price range of where they should be, which is kind of funny. You look at the Heritage line, which is made in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where the original Gibsons were made.
For the most part, more affordable than a custom shop Gibson.
Absolutely, and made with the old building techniques that they used when the plant was there.
Right.
And that's almost unheard of that a U.S. manufacturer, where everything's made in the U.S., is beating their prices and making actually a better Les Paul than Les Paul.
Right. That is crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah.
But, you know, and you, like I said, you want to go out and do a custom shop Les Paul or, you know, a Les Paul custom or something like that. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
And that's fine because, you know, if you want the real thing, that's fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
you know, but if you also want to play a Les Paul style guitar and, you know, your pockets aren't deep or you're kind, you know, more on the beginner end of playing, even if you're playing out, you know, you can go pick up any one of the Epiphone Les Pauls.
Sure.
And, you know, they're going to play better than
some of the real
anything that was, you know, an inexpensive guitar back in the day.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah. And the other thing is too, is I've known a couple guys that play out and they don't take their $4,000 PRS 24 custom 24. They take the SE model because they're like, look, if somebody lifts it, I don't care.
And
or
that's
if
been happening way too much lately.
Yeah, or if a beer gets spilled into it or the headstock snaps off, it's look, it's a loss. You don't want to lose $700 or $800, but it sure is a lot less than if your $4,000 guitar gets seriously damaged.
100%.
Look, we all can't beat Joe Bonamassa and buy a plane ticket for a 59 Les Paul.
That's true. That's true.
Man, come on. That's what I'm saying.
Well, and I'm going to leave that one there.
Hey, it's always good, right?
Leave that one there. That's right.
I like it. So until next time, my friend.
That's right, because we'll pick it up where we left it off.
I'm Mick Marcelino.
That's right. I can't even remember my name. I'm Jeff Bober.
Exactly. And Mark Zuckerberg
That's what
sucks.
they told me.
And we're always saying...
Onward.
Be sure and follow the show on Twitter @AmpsandAxes. Also, make sure you like the show on Facebook. For news, comments, and everything else, visit the webpage ampsandaxescast.com. Thanks for listening.